Welcome to Big Break Pod. I'm your host, Thomas M. Copeland, and today we are talking about failure. So today's show is all about failure. And we have a guest here today. His name is Ben Gabler. He's the founder and CEO of Rocket.net and many other businesses. He's a very close friend of mine from elementary school. We've kind of grown up together and sort of watched each other's sort of successes happen in parallel. So I'm really proud and excited to have him on because he's got a lot to say on the topic, but also because he's a good friend, and I've always really enjoyed talking with him, and I think you'll enjoy listening as well. But to kind of frame this up, I want you to think about what we're talking about today in failure being something that is really inevitable, right? So like I'm just going to level with everybody out there right now. Failure is something that's going to be inevitable. So if you're afraid of it, the biggest thing you can do right now today is to start learning mechanisms and tactics for turning that fear of the failure into something else, right? In other words, do everything you possibly can to let go of your fear. Because the reality is this, you're going to fail. You're going to fail in some ways, big and small throughout your entire life. So whether you're listening and you're maybe in your formative, more younger years, right? High school, college, you're going to have some failures ahead of you, probably in your 20s, definitely probably in your 30s. They're coming. If you're in your 30s, like I am and Ben is, and you're going into your 40s, you've likely experienced some failures, big and small. And if you're a little, older even than that, you will very likely have had some failures, big and small. They're going to happen throughout our lives, right? So first and foremost, get rid of your fear of it because it's happening. Sorry to break the news to you. It's going to happen. The key is just recognizing when it does and having healthy strategies for coping with failure, right? And so unhealthy strategies is, reveling in it, right? Alcoholism, depression. Find ways to combat those with sort of therapy and care and speaking out about it and not being afraid to really, really face it. So we're really going to talk about healthy coping mechanisms and how you, when you do feel failure, how you really turn that into a learning experience, which is something that Ben will talk a lot about in our interview, and I think you'll get a real I hope sense of enthusiasm and confidence about being able to turn your failures into learning experiences and successes. So look, the bottom line is this, especially for people in creative arts. Failure is inevitable. You can't force it. You can't rush it. You can't even control it. You will have a plan. You will go about your plan. And then guess what? Bam, something's going to happen. It's going to throw a huge wrench in your plan. It's going to mess everything up and derail you. And you're going to have to learn how to bounce back from that. Whether that be a big casting that, you blew, or whether it be that show that you thought you had in the bag that you didn't, or whether it be that show that you wrote and you tried to get it pitched and bought, but nobody's buying it, right? You're going to be hitting failures in your creative career and in your acting career. So just be ready to tackle it. The reason why Ben's on today is because he's done a really good job of embracing those failures over the years. And so I think have I in a lot of ways, though, I still think about some of the biggest failures of my life. And, I do look back on them as experiences that were difficult to overcome, right? And so you may be feeling that as well. I mean, there's been countless businesses that I have tried to start that never got off the ground. There's been a couple of businesses that did get off the ground, like a real estate brokerage that I co-founded in 2016 with an ex-wife of mine that business, eventually broke down and failed for me. In fact, that marriage broke down and failed for me too, and that was a really personal low for me. That was a really tough time. So look, I'm afraid of failure in my own company now that I run, quite frankly, and I think about it a lot. And I've got a big personal move coming up where I'm moving to New York City with my family, and my now wife and baby, who's a young baby, and I think about and worry about failure a lot. So this episode and getting to sit down with Ben and kind of talk about that was really kind of relaxing, and it brought a sense of calm over me as we talked, and I hope it does for you too if you're out there and you're sort of facing something really big right now. I hope that you have the same effect with this too. So without further ado, we are going to take a quick ad break, and then we're going to get right into our interview.
If you're an actor serious about your craft, then you know you're serious about improving your read, your presentation, and your on-camera delivery. And there's no faster way to sharpen your skills than with detailed, collaborative feedback from your fellow actors, directors, casting directors, coaches, and other creative professionals in the industry. So how do you get in front of the people you need to impress? With Show Coach. Available for Apple and Android, this exciting app gives you a stage to showcase your work, including self-tapes, reels, and monologues, specifically to solicit feedback from the professionals who can hire you. And for a limited time, Show Coach is absolutely free to use. Industry professionals can apply to become a coach and earn money for critiquing student posts. Download the app as a student or coach from your mobile app store or visit showcoach.app to learn more. That's showcoach.app. Show Coach, artists encouraging greatness.
All right, welcome back. And the guest here today with me is Ben Gabler. Ben is the founder and CEO of Rocket.net, one of the fastest WordPress hosting websites out there. And also, maybe even more importantly, a friend of mine for what, Ben? 25 years, something very long like that.
However long ago elementary school was, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I guess if we were to do the math, that's 20. I mean, high school was 20 years ago, so that's at least 25. Or oh my goodness,
we're getting older, right?
We are getting older. I think we would have been 10 in elementary school. Is it fair to say that almost 30 years?
Yeah, I would say about 30 years for sure.
That is insane. I don't know anybody for 30 years that I still talk to. So I'm very, very appreciative that we have this time, that we're still able to connect after all these years. And so today, I'm bringing you on because I want to chat about this theme of this episode is all about failure. And one of the ways that I want to start is just by recognizing that failure and failing is such a hot button thing. Like, there's no shortage of books you can go on Amazon and get. Embrace the failure. Meta's tag, that owns Facebook, fail fast. I mean, it's kind of a hot and almost cliche thing. And I think that bothers me. It probably would bother you because ultimately, like, the failure itself isn't a good thing. Failure sucks. I mean, we've lived through it and we're going to talk about it. Failure is not a fun thing to live through. It's sort of like what you do with that failure and the resilience that you show afterwards that really matters. So, first and foremost, I think I just have to establish some credibility. You are credible to speak about failure, Ben. Is that true? Have you had some failure?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Anybody that would say no is full of it, right? You have to fail, right? It's more of a learning experience as long as you look at it the right way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would say, this show is consumed because I'm an actor, writer, entrepreneur. It's mostly consumed, I'm guessing, by other actors, especially like actors that are looking to kind of get into acting. And the whole arc of this show is about how you don't just get into acting. I mean, acting takes a lifetime to learn and to master. And so, what happens over the course of lifetime? What are some sure things that are definitely going to happen? Well, taxes, death, and probably some failure, And so I think, who feels that more than anybody else than probably actors on a daily basis with their self-tapes and their jobs that they're trying to get, but also entrepreneurs like you and I, who, take risks, roll the dice on an idea, and build it until it either surpasses a point of no return, right? That you've reached some scalability, that you're kind of an established company now. Maybe that's the 5-year mark. I'm definitely curious to your thoughts. Or you crash. You run out of money. You run out of runway. Your idea doesn't take hold. I mean, name a million things that could happen, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, especially, it's an interesting comparison that I've never really thought about, and huge into movies and TV and all that fun stuff. Um, it's very similar when it comes to the journey of, an aspiring actor or actress, along with an aspiring entrepreneur. I think there's a lot of similar uphill battles and struggles that go into both, right? Like, Tom Cruise didn't just wake up and become the best actor for action Mission Impossible 18 film, right? I think a lot of people don't see, especially maybe even as generations kind of change. And, like today's generation, they probably don't know about, the movie Cocktail or some of the other stuff that he did very, very early on in order to get where he had to go, where he's at today. So, I think it's similar to that kind of like that picture online where you see like the little iceberg barely sticking up out of the water, but then below it is like this huge thing of ice. And, when you think about a journey in life, whether it's your career or, a hobby or anything, like, there's always this period of when you learned how to ride a bike, right? Like you had training wheels and you probably fell 15 times, but eventually you learned how to balance and you were riding without training wheels. And today, 38 years later, you can jump on a bike and ride it, even if you haven't been on one in 15 years. So, I think there's a lot of things in life that anything in life, like professional athletes, like, Nolan Ryan had to learn how to throw a strike, right? Like maybe he had a super strong arm and could throw very fast, but he had to figure out how to throw a perfect ball, right? So I think when it comes to like building a business or, building a career in something like acting, like you have to fail, because if you don't, right, like you can't learn how to, succeed, right? So like in every failure that I've had in my career, I've learned from that. And that's why with Rocket, I launched it in 2020, and everything I had failed and learned from in the last 20 years of my career up until that launch point, I knew I would not make those same mistakes. So that's why, within 4 years, Rocket's doing just under 6 million a year in revenue with a very healthy 50% EBITDA. It's because I was able to fail before, and I'm not failing. I have different failures at Rocket. There's different places we've obviously made mistakes. Nobody's perfect, but all of those things over the last 20 years that I've learned from, help make this business what it is today.
Yeah, that's right. I can definitely resonate with that as somebody who worked in law firms for a lot of years, worked in marketing and building websites and graphic design and kind of just like operations and digital marketing, and then parlayed that into the company that I own and operate today, Vinetegrate. And just, I totally can relate to, you make all the mistakes up front, and then when you're ready to start that thing that you're really ready to put everything in, you come with all that experience and you avoid those pitfalls. So so that's interesting. Actually, and you got me thinking about something else too, which is something I don't know if I've heard this before or just said it. I'll take credit for it. But I'll just take credit for it now.
Sure.
If you're not failing, then you're probably not trying. I mean, I think that's
Correct.
really kind of like, at the end of the
Absolutely.
day, if like you're doing something and everything is going like smoothly, then you're either not growing or, I mean, you're just, so nothing's happening,
Right.
if you've been an actor or you started a web hosting company and, 3 years later, you don't have any customers on your web hosting company, you're probably not trying, right? I mean, you need to
Sure.
show some customers. So let's go back, man. Let's hop in the time machine and wind all the way back. Cause I think that, of all the time that you and I have just spent together and hung out, we've gotten pretty deep personally, a lot of happy hours where we've gotten deep, but I don't think I've ever asked you this, which is, let's hop in the time machine. Let's go all the way back. There was a time in high school when the rest of us were, like I was in drama club. I guess it would be no surprise, I was the president of the dramas club for like 2 years, mostly because I can go in there and as president, I had keys to the drama room and I could hang out there and do nothing. So I loved that. That was great. I did absolutely nothing with my talents at the time. But you were tinkering on website servers, and you were tinkering on the internet at an age when the internet was really commercialized. There may be some listeners here that don't realize, like, there was a time when, like, Facebook wasn't a thing, and Facebook just came online in 2003. And when it did come online, it came online on just college campuses. So, 1999 to 2003, when we're coming of age in high school, right? I mean, the internet was starting to really commercialize, and you were tinkering on the back end infrastructure of that. One thing that, I want listeners to understand is that like when you load a web page, you see all the pretty graphics and stuff, right? But you don't realize, or at least you may not think about that there's an entire infrastructure behind it that is, it's a science, it's an art, it's a business, it's a talent, it's a skill. Like there's skilled people that do this and you're one of them. So take us all the way back to that time when you were tinkering, I think in high school, maybe it was earlier. Tell me if that's true.
Sure.
But take us kind of back to that time and sort of really specifically, when did you realize that what you were doing could make you money?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, even back in middle school, right? I'm sure many, people our age would remember like AOL Instant Messenger and being able to get home from school and jump online and talk to your friends or talk to some people all over the world. It was a really neat time to grow up. And I'm like a huge like documentary buff for like the 90s, the thousands, like kind of like looking back on some of the stuff that you really just forget about. But I would say in the 90s, when I was still even, 10 years old, playing around on bulletin board systems or AOL, I was always doing something on the computer. And it was just super interesting to me, whether it was gaming or whether it was just, trying to have conversations. I think one of the cool things about the internet is like I was not the popular kid in high school, but I had thousands of friends on the internet. So it's very like for introverted people, it's an amazing way to kind of socialize without the fear of socializing. So, at the end of the day, it's text exchange with somebody that, quite honestly, you don't even know could be anybody on the other end of that computer, which is scary as well. But at the same time, I think it really allowed me to feel comfortable and socialize and, really be a part of something that was more or less like the internet crowd. And in high school, if I wasn't surfing, I was either delivering pizza or I was at home on the internet. And, when I deliver pizza, it was one of my favorite jobs. I learned a lot. I was very close with the owner. I learned about, bookkeeping. I learned about, a very important lesson, which was, if somebody didn't show up, the owner of that company could deliver the pizza. If somebody didn't show up to wash dishes, he could wash dishes. Like the really takeaway there was, you shouldn't start a business that you can't operate like fully, right? Because at the end of the day, the only person you could truly depend on is yourself. And you're either going to let yourself down or you're going to come through. When it comes to other human beings, there's so many different variables, whether it's personal life or, freak accidents, whatever it could be, like if you have to completely rely on somebody else for everything in your day-to-day operation, you could be in a really tough spot. So, I think for me, I was delivering pizza, making a little bit of money. And then, I was on IRC as well, which is like another chat protocol that has been around forever. Like if you use Slack, like Slack was effectively molded from IRC. It was very similar. And somebody had told me they started this web hosting thing and they were making $1,200 a month. And I was like, oh my God, like that's an insane amount of money. Like I need to do that. So, at the end of high school, like I just started to, got my first server probably back in 2002. And just, kind of broke it 15 times and tried to learn everything I possibly could about fixing it. And that's just how I kind of fell into it. I started a little company and then ended up joining up at HostGator, as employee number 8. They grew to be 100 million run rate business, really big business. Left when they moved to Texas, started my own company in 2006, built that to a little under 2 million a year in revenue, completely bootstrapped, early 20s. Sold it in 2010, worked at HostGator for a little while and they sold the business. And, I kind of took a break and then I did some consulting roles and ultimately landed a senior product manager role at Godaddy, where I relaunched the entire hosting division at Godaddy, which was like a really huge milestone for me. Just being able to go into a $1 billion company and move the needle was incredible. But I also learned a lot and I could, I made it a year. And it was just, very corporate and very big company. And I just wanted to get back into the startup scene. So, I think really just, kind of in and out for my entire career has been one way or another touching technology that works with the internet. So, today at Rocket.net, we host over 50,000 of some of the largest websites in the world, we host websites for Berkeley, some Disney properties. We've hosted promos for Shell Gas and Southwest. We've done a lot of really big things. And, a lot of that is just from during that period of time we just talked about. I had many failures, messing up servers, deleting data on accident, not having the right support structure, you name it. It's all happened. And, when I was, in my first getting started, like somebody said, run this command. I had no idea what I was doing. I ran it, wiped my whole server. They're like laughing at me.
I can't even
right?
imagine the feeling of looking at like a blue screen of death, the equivalent of whatever a blue screen of death is for a server.
But guess what?
Like,
I'll never do that again. You know,
never run that command again. That's right.
Yeah, I'll never do that again. So, you know, it's been really interesting, and I feel very fortunate to have, you know, fallen into technology when I did, because if you look at like my daughter, she's 5, she's already can work an iPad like nobody's business. So it's like today's kids are just there's so much technology around us from smart, you know, when we were in high school, we had Nokias like with Snake, you know, and texting was just becoming a thing. Dude, right. So we kind of got to see.
Did you have a sidekick? I love the sidekick.
I did not. I always wanted one.
It was awesome.
It was so cool. But yeah, I do remember having a Windows sort of like Palm Pilot thing that I could actually like manage servers like from my phone.
Did you have to hack it?
Yeah, back in the day.
Did you have to like hack
No. I mean, it was just like a Windows CE or something, I think they called it. It was something like that. And it was just like a mobile Windows OS. It was pretty cool. But you know, it was yeah, you know, I mean, you know,
by the way,
like
for anybody who's wondering how cool a sidekick is, it's actually today it's not that cool. All it was it looked like a Game Boy, and you'd use your thumb to flick the screen up. And literally the only thing this thing did is that the screen would go whoop, and it would come up and reveal a keyboard, and then you would close it, pew, and that was it. But that thing was insane. To your point, it was one of the first devices that have a QWERTY keyboard, right? That's
like
true.
fully at your fingertips, right? Like that had a full-on QWERTY keyboard, similar to like BlackBerry and such. But
BlackBerry, right?
But again, you know, the reason that thing existed is because text messaging all of a sudden took off like crazy. Now, you know, texting, it took forever. Like you had to text on a Nokia, like to type one word, it was like 2 minutes, right? But on this, you're just bam, bam, bam on this little keyboard in your pocket.
Yeah, that's right. I guess maybe marking the democratization of communications, like in your hand for the first time, probably that humans have ever seen. It's an interesting concept.
Absolutely.
So very cool. So kind of moving forward then, from this moment in high school when, you know, you saw somebody was making $1,200 on servers and you're like, ooh, $1,200 sounds good. I want to do that too. You know, was there ever kind of like a fear in any, like, where was obviously your risk level must have been high, but to be fair, let's also be fair. In high school, there's not much of a risk level, right? In high school,
there's not. No family.
You got no family, you got no money, but you got time. You've got all the time in the world, right? And so you're able to put time into it to see if you can turn that time into some money coming back in. You know, I wonder for those that are out there that might be listening about maybe an idea or a hobby or something they're working on that they'd really love to be able to get into, but they do worry about, I've got a full-time job, I've got a family, I've got to feed. How would you think if you were in that position? How would you, sort of knowing what you know, how would you kind of think about how to hedge all of that? How do you think about a really great idea versus what it's going to take to execute, and how do you manage that? How do you juggle that? How would you juggle that?
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. I actually did this in 2020, right? I left my job that I had, well-paying job, and I wanted to go out and pursue this idea because, you know, I saw this massive opportunity in the market. Wasn't necessarily my first go around in this industry. So I felt pretty confident, but at the same time, it was super scary because I had, you know, like a 1-year-old, right? Not even. So, you know, at that point, I was able to offset that by doing some consulting work that, you know, I was very upfront about, like, I'm building this business, but, you know, at the same time, like, I can consult for you. And that's how I supplemented my income. But it would have either been that, or I would have had to, you know, go take an investment on, you know, if I was able to find one, which is a whole nother challenge within itself. Yep. So, you know, I think it was a very real fear. And, you know, if you're not afraid of it, then I would be really worried, right? Like if you came to me and said, I'm going to go do this and it's going to be great, and you have no fear, that's not a good sign, right? Like that is a very bad sign, because you probably haven't really thought it through to realize that there is more chance of failure than success. Because like you said earlier, you don't have to try too hard to fail, but you got to try really hard to succeed. Right. You know, so that's where, you know, I've had friends that want to expand their business, but they're very scared of it. And I said, that's great. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you should be scared. Like, that's a big deal. Like that is something very scary. It's a risk. And anytime you take a risk, there's always some sort of fear involved in that. And if not, then I mean, that's just a It's very challenging, right? So I look at things like that in a much different way. Um, so yeah, but to that point, if you're very passionate about something like you and I have talked about, you're moving soon and what you want to do and something that you want to pursue, my advice was do it. Go do it, right? Like you have all the boxes checked, you're nervous about it, but you have the passion, and it's like that's when regret comes in, right? 10 years from now, if you didn't take the leap and actually try it, you're going to have the what if for the rest of your life. And it's not worth it. Take a year, maybe two, right? Put a timeline on it. Be like, this is my runway, right? Just as if you had an investment. Here's my runway. If this doesn't happen by X, Y, and Z, I know that I gave it my best and I tried and I have to move on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, good point. So we've talked a lot about sort of where you started, kind of lessons learned. Let's talk about kind of I really want to hear about the nitty gritty, dirty stuff. So things were going really well in 2010 when you sold your first company. But then I understand some years later, because you and I have talked about it many times, that things were going well until they weren't going well anymore, right? And some things came to a head for you, and there was probably some low points, right?
Sure.
I think even around that same time, I had my low points as well, which I'll kind of lead with. I mean, when I think back, I was thinking back through this episode and sort of how I'd ask this question to you to frame it up for you. And the thing that I thought about was that my two lowest points, I would say, in my adult life has been the failure of a real estate brokerage that I had started with my once wife, and also the divorce from that once wife, my now ex-wife. That, those two things happened pretty concurrently. And actually, if I'm really going to go even deeper, that was right around the same time before that. What happened is I lost a baby. So we had a baby, we lost a baby. It's really tough. So those three things almost happened in like succession. And that was between the years of like 2016 and like 2018. So, that was the lowest point, I would say, of my adult life. And in some ways, you could say there's ways in which you could say all of those things are failures, right? And there's ways in which you can say some of those things were just bad luck and just bad timing. I wonder.
Or life, right?
Or life, that's exactly right. It's just life. And so anybody who's out there who's not quite an adult yet listening, you're going to be going through whatever your life is. But Ben's life was something that was really personal to Ben. And I'm really curious to sort of to kind of get into that space a little bit and take us back to that. And I mean, honestly, also take us through the through line to how these low points in our adult life kind of set us up for sort of the next stage and kind of how we bounce back from that. Because let's be honest, not everybody always bounces back from really low points. Those are big,
Sure.
heavy things we're talking about. So tell me a little bit about it if you're comfortable with
Sure.
it. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, there's been various things that have happened in my life professionally and personally, in my mid 20s, running a business, going through breakups and also trying to have a social life at the same time. Like there was one point where I literally rented a apartment in Abacoa, which is sort of like our downtown Jupiter. That was like a big hit for a while.
Yeah.
I knew that being 24/7 with my company HostNine at the time, I had to be available to go to a computer and laptops. I had a laptop then, but it's not, there wasn't Wi-Fi everywhere. There was no tethering. So what I decided to do was get an apartment that was 2 floors above the bars. And what I would do is I would go downstairs, hang out with my friends, try to have a social life. And then when I would get a work alert, I would go upstairs, fix the problem, and go back downstairs. So, one of the biggest challenges, whether, anytime whether you're building a business or trying to build a career, finding the right balance between dedicating yourself to that and yourself to yourself is a very real challenge. It can create depression. It can create, alcohol. It can lead to all these different things, right? So that for me was a very important moment where I tried to balance both. And then when we think about some of the other stuff that's happening, like post exiting that business, I tried to buy a company that sold water filtration systems and just got completely conned by the owner. Part of it, I was, sort of blindsided, like not really paying as much of attention as I should have during the deal. So take full responsibility for, some oversights on my part. And I was just like, it'll kind of run itself. No big deal. But that was a multi 6-figure mistake. Right. And that was something that was very hard for me to go through because I wasn't used to Like that's not supposed to happen, right? You're not supposed to lose right after a big win. And that was just something that, I had to go through. And, anything from, again, just a lot of different, being at jobs where I've had this equity promise and then all of a sudden it's not there anymore, or, dedicating years of my life to projects that just never were going to launch or see the light of day. It's been a lot, right? There's been a lot of ups and downs, and there always is, right? There's no there, like I said, it's nothing is just easy, nothing is perfect. You're always going to have challenges, especially when it comes to personal life and your career, right? So there's been a number of things, and you just have to, for me, anytime some of the personal stuff, it is stupid or cliche as it might sound, is just one day you wake up and you're like, what am I doing? Like I've got to get back in the game. But you're right. A lot of people don't bounce back from that. But I think that an important takeaway from this could be expect it. Just expect it, right? Like it is going to happen. Maybe it's a death, which is something we can't control. Maybe it's a breakup. Maybe it's a flat tire. Maybe it's a crazy bill that comes your way. I've been sued. I've gone through everything you could possibly imagine. People that I've tried to help try to rip me off. Right. And, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on people that just flat out con artists. Right. And, it's not obvious at the time. You give people a chance. I had, just various different scenarios over my career where I had been in lawsuits with companies and I didn't know if I was going to be able to afford it. Right. And that's how sometimes these bigger companies may try to stop a threat. But I think the real takeaway is, you have to sort of plan ahead for things to not go perfect as planned, right? Like you're going to have speed bumps. There's always potholes in the road. You just have to kind of tell yourself that and be able to recognize when you might be going through a speed bump, and then you just kind of power through it and move on.
Yeah, that's right. So, looking kind of forward now we're all we're 40. Let's be honest. Are you 40 yet?
I'm still 39.
All right, good. I'm still 39 too. I just say I'm 40 because I'm rounding up. Are you ready to start rounding up? Or you past the 6-month mark and you have to round up?
No, I will not round anywhere until I turn 40.
Okay, got it. You're purist. You're waiting for the big 40. Got it.
Yeah.
God, are we doing anything special for our 40, man? It's a big deal, I think. I feel like we're halfway there.
Yeah.
I feel like we're at the halftime game. We're at halftime right now.
Yeah. No, I think about that. Funny enough, like I think about that a lot, like, wow, like this is actually kind of this is a big deal, right? So yeah, no, I mean, you got to blow it out for your 40th,
You think so? All right. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So private jet to Vegas, 40.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So looking ahead, you actually alluded to something a little bit ago about me, which is that my plan is that right now we're preparing, me and my family, my wife and baby, we are moving to New York City. In fact, we're moving this month, my gosh, while we're recording this. This will be coming out in September. I'll already be in New York City by that point, but it's a huge life change, and I'm moving because we've got some opportunities for my business and my companies up there, sure. But B, I'm doing some work with the neighborhood playhouse up there in Manhattan. And really this is about, me looking at my life, coming up on 40, and wanting to go ahead and take advantage of the fact that I can go do what I really want to do, which is be on stage and be in a theater community, right? So I'm doing that. Like you said, I am scared as hell. I've shared that with you. It's just me and you, and I'm sharing it here for the world to see. I'm scared as hell. I mean, it's a huge thing to up your entire life and move to, across the country to a place like New York City. My family is wonderfully supportive, but they don't really understand it. My wife is beautifully understandable. She's incredible. She's supporting it. And the baby's going to enjoy it, I'm sure. The point is, though, that it doesn't change the fact that I'm still terrified. And I wonder if there's some people out there that might have something similar happening with them, where, maybe they are trying to make an entrepreneurial leap, or maybe they're thinking about school, or maybe they're thinking about changing their job to something else. And I wonder what kind of advice you might have beyond the good advice of, hey, you're scared, that's a good thing. What other advice might you have for people like myself and anyone else who's, really doing an upending life change to try to chase a passion, because you've certainly been in that seat before where you've made a big life change to change a passion. What kind of advice do you think you might have for us?
Yeah, I've done it. I've moved to Texas for work. I've moved to Arizona. That was the farthest. Arizona was not a trivial commute to come see family. It was a pain. Luckily with like New York, it's not too bad. A couple hour flight, same time zone. So I think it's one of those things, especially if like where we grew up in Jupiter's, we all call it a bubble. Um, it wasn't until I moved away that I really came back and appreciated what we have in Jupiter. So I think anytime you have a chance to go see somewhere else, I think you should totally go for it, right? Because the worst thing that can happen is you again, maybe it's a 1 year lease. You try it for a year, you're seeing new place, you're eating some new food, taking some new chances. But if it doesn't work, you come back, right? Like it's really not the end of the world, especially when everything aligns with your professional job, with your income and things like that. It's not like you're taking this huge leap to like start over in a new area. But there are plenty of people that do take that leap for an opportunity that they may not know what that it's going to pan out to be yet. But like when I took the job at GoDaddy, I had no desire to leave Jupiter for the third time to go, especially to Arizona. But the job was such an amazing opportunity, something I needed to do for me. It was a no brainer, but it was very challenging, very, very hard to be away. Especially with when I was by myself at the time. I didn't have a partner there. I didn't have friends there. I had a couple of friends, but really it was just pure professional move just for work. So it was it's interesting, but yeah, I mean, I think if you can do it, like I think it's great, and it's just a great experience.
Yeah, so go do it. I hear you. And you sold? Did you sell your house, if I remember correctly, when you first moved away, or when you did move away at some point? So you didn't have that.
I did.
You didn't really necessarily have that backup plan. I mean, if you needed to come back home, you'd come back
Right.
home and figure it
You'd have
out.
to be on the job. Yeah, you'd have to figure it out. But I had some money that as a cushion from the exit I had in 2010, and I was doing well at GoDaddy, so I wasn't too worried about it at the time. The housing market was pretty normal around our
Yes,
area,
it was at
which
that
is not
time.
the same now post COVID. But
Right.
but I've seen a lot of people even just rent their house out and they go move for a year, right? And
Yep.
that way, if something doesn't work out, they can come back to their home. Like
Yeah,
that's totally
that's the contingency plan I have now, which is that I'm not selling my place. I'm just going to rent it out, and that's kind of my safety blanket. It's interesting. I was talking to somebody else about this, and I mentioned that I have that safety blanket of not selling my place, and another friend of mine said, well, then your risk is basically not there, which I think is interesting. I think that's an interesting idea, that there's really not much risk there. That the risk is really just a year. I go for a year and I hate it and it sucks and I come back. And does that take away from sort of the risk-taking nature? In other words, if you have a safety backup plan, good, you've got a safety backup plan, but does that also kind of hold you back from fully throwing yourself into this thing ahead of you? Not necessarily the way I feel, but it's an interesting concept to just kind of think about for anybody out there who might be in this position. Safety blankets are good,
sure.
but they can also sort of maybe don't let it stop you from taking the risk that you need to take in order to achieve the goal that you need to achieve, right?
Right.
So, cool, man. Well, this has been great. The one thing also that I wanted to make a through line on with this is that you and I have been working on the internet for years. You work on the back end of the internet. I've always worked on the front end. I was always kind of the front end, designer and laying out websites and all that good stuff. And one thing I did want to just talk about real quick is, first and foremost, do you have any actors that you know of that are on your servers and Rocket.net? Anybody that you know? Do you know any actors? Am I the actor that you know? You got to know more.
So I mean, we host Sean Hannity.
Oh, there you go. he's
Yeah.
he's kind of an actor, right?
Yeah, he's kind of an actor.
Yeah, he's kind of an actor.
No, we do actually. We have a lot of agencies that we work with that represent, some actors and actresses. We I'm trying to think off the top of my head. We have a couple, like there's an agency that works with Hannity and a couple of others. Even one of the candidates was running their event website on us. We've done a wide variety of different things, but we do have a lot of like artists as well. That they just they need a website. I think what's interesting is over the years, having a website went from being cool to like a requirement, especially with COVID. Like if you were a lawn maintenance company and you couldn't take payments on the internet during COVID, like you weren't getting paid, right? So, I think similar to 2008, with the housing crash, the COVID phenomena has actually just been massive for the internet, right? Like the growth from commerce and side hustles and taking payments online. I think we continue to see these different things happen around the world that result in more growth for digital presence. So we definitely have a large amount of websites, from political to nataschakitchen.com, one of the largest food blogs in the world, and different artists, photographers, actors and actresses and management companies. And, really it all just bubbles up to, if you are doing anything, you should have a website for it. Like your business has a website. This podcast will have a website, right?
Yes.
Even imagine like for you, like going with Broadway and everything, like you have, TomCopeland.com and it's your headshots and what you've done. And it's like your digital, like, like business card, right? And this is all about me. Here's what I've done. And it kind of takes things like IMDb a step further. Like you can control it. It's your brand, right? Like you are the brand, right? So I think every brand needs to have an online presence, right? So Facebook page is great. TikTok's great. But you're very confined onto those platforms and what that experience is. Granted, you create the video, you create the picture, but you can't recreate the actual experience that user has on that platform. Whereas if somebody goes to your website, you can control everything, right? You can say, all right, when they get there, I want them to see this video no matter what. Or when they get there, I want them to see this t-shirt that I'm trying to sell. Or, here, you come to my website, bam, it is a what do they call it? I can't think of it, but basically, when you create your reel, right? You want them to see your reel. Like, here's me acting in this. Here's me as a drama. Here's me in comedy. Here's me here. And you can control that versus somebody that might land on your Instagram. They're like, I don't know which one I want to watch. Maybe this one.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So, the ability to control what's on the website is crucial as well. You're right. I do have a website for this pod. I do have a website for myself, castingtom.com, which also matches the Instagram handle of castingtom. So you're absolutely right. And, and that second thing that you just chuckled at matters, right? So why this matters is because all of these properties that are out there can all feed into each other. There's a very, very old concept, as old as, basically Google, called SEO, that folks who are listening here may not be familiar with it. The bottom line is when you Google something, Google returns back relevant sources from around the internet, right? Relevant sources with most relevant on top. That's essentially what a search engine is. It'll return back what it thinks you're looking for, right? And so if you're using Instagram, if you're using TikTok, you're using IMDb, but you don't have a website, then Google is going to return whatever it is that it thinks is at the top. And it's not going to be your website. It's not going to be the thing that you've created, that you've curated and put out there. But if you do have a website, it's likely that your website will be first. So my website comes first because that's the first thing I want people to see.
Yeah, exactly. It's your name.
That's right. Because I can put everything you just said. I can put what I want up there. So my structure is pictures. Actually, really, if we're just taking it from like top down, it's contact info, top right, can't miss it. If you want to get a hold of me, bam, there it is. It's pictures, and then from there it goes into a little bit about me as a blurb, then it goes into resume, then it goes into reels, right? And so I have very carefully curated it to fold you down, but I've also done it in a way that tells the search engine what I want to return when somebody searches my name. So this is really important for, you're right, any artist. I mean, actors, sure, but like any artist that's building any kind of a business, if you are parlaying your hobby, your creative interest, you are starting to parlay it into the business. Like we talked about in the very beginning, when did you first realize you can make money? you might be at that stage right now where you're starting to think, I think I can make money from this thing. It's at that time you want to start thinking about how you're presented on the internet. And a TikTok and Instagram, great. It's not the only thing you need to do. You need to be thinking holistically about the whole thing. And you want to be thinking about what you want people to see when they search for you first and foremost. So that's
it's interesting, like even you look at like, I'm sure you remember Erica Wolf, right? From school, Erica Gouldy. She's a big real estate agent in Jupiter. I've used her forever, like trust her when it comes to everything. She's great. I told her for years because the way that she was very successful, and this is something I think that is super cool, especially for actors and entrepreneurs. When you look at something, there's a very traditional way. Like if you say, I want to be an actor, well, people are going to probably have varying advice. But at the end of the day, a lot of the commonalities between what everybody tells you to do, there's going to be a very common ground there. And this is the way that people typically go. You move to LA or move to New York, do whatever. Same thing with a real estate agent, right? Like when you want to become a realtor, you can go work for a brokerage and you get some leads and you call said leads and you eventually get your name out there and you get a listing and then you list the house, right? Mm-hmm. Well, what Erica did is she kind of took that to the next level and took what you and I are very familiar with, like SEM, SEO, and just everything related to search on social media and Google, My Business, things like that. And she took all of that, started going to these marketing conferences that had nothing to do with real estate and really learning about social media marketing. Mm-hmm. And I kept telling her, I'm like, why are you not selling this? Right. And like, I'm not a huge influencer fan of like, buy my How to Get Rich book. It's not about that. But I'm like, you have this extremely good talent and understanding of marketing for real estate. Mm-hmm. You need to make this a course and you need to sell it. And she finally did, actually, like a week ago or so, she launched it. And, it's been really cool. I think it's Erica Core or something. I have to double check, but it's really neat because she takes all of these different things and it's what helped her become the agent she is today. So when you start to think about, you want to be an actor, but what are some of the other things that like, for example, search engine optimization, right? Like how can you get your acting website in front of more people looking for, stand-ins or, whatever it might be, right? You now have an advantage over everybody else because you can market yourself, right? So I think there's something really to be said there. And again, you have to have a website for that, but I think there's just some really unique opportunities to, even like, let's take music, for example, right? If you started a band in 1995, right? Like you were, like the old story of Blink-182 is some kid put their tape in his dad's car so he would listen to it on the way to work and he was a record executive. Mm-hmm. They signed him, right? Mm-hmm. So now if you started a band in 2004, you put your music on MySpace and you just start following everybody in the world. Now all of a sudden, Post Malone got famous. I think it was from SoundCloud. Right. So there's just so many more opportunities to just get your brand and your name and your business and everything out there through the internet. I think it's just even today, I think it's a very underutilized resource for common people.
Yeah, that's right. And that was another point that I was going to make too, which is that, sort of the opportunities to create content is, it's explosive. The amount of niche platforms out there for everything. From like gaming, and you can monetize you gaming for crying out loud, right? To online courses, and you've got a million website block builders out there. You've got e-commerce stores. Heck, podcasting, right? There was a time in which what we're doing right now was never done. It wasn't even a thought, right? Radio was franchised, right? It was franchised by radio towers, and you had a radio license, and like. The internet, of course, upended all of that. So, there's opportunities out there to get your name out there, but the website is still the way in which it can be the central hub of the spoke, right? It's the central hub of the spoke that you control and that you feed content out there that these other platforms can pick up on. It's interesting because I was thinking about, recently, I wanted to do like kind of a blog where I'd talk a little bit, I'd chat a little bit, I'd write a little bit about like each one of these episodes and just like some parting thought afterwards on each episode. And the question is, so where do I put that? There's Scribed, I think, is a thing. There is Medium is another blog hosting platform. Google, I think, still has a blog platform. And of course, there's a blog right there on my WordPress website that I use at Casting Tom, right? And so there's 100 choices. But when you can control it on your own branded domain name, then that is going to be a higher quality response that Google is going to be looking for. It's going to be a higher quality index that Google is looking for.
So. And to that point, right, you could invest 95% of your time on your blog and then find the right topic to publish on Medium that links back to your blog. So that way you're capturing this new audience, right, with content. There's a book out there called Killing Marketing. It's a really good one. And it talks a lot about not necessarily return on investment, but return on audience, right? So you can start to think about, like, maybe you go out there and maybe even pay like $500 or something for a newsletter to include your post in it because you feel it's relevant to that group. And then you're going to have them read it, and then they're going to come back and read more, and there's boom, they subscribe, right? So I think there's, again, I just go back to, I think the power of the internet to build a brand is extremely underutilized beyond TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Those should all be on-ramps to your experience of your website.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Beautiful. I mean, think about it, right? A TikTok influencer goes viral, like the Hawk Tuah girl, right? Now all of a sudden, she's now on social media and on Twitter. What happens? She's selling a hat on her website, right? So you build all of that audience up, and you can funnel it ultimately to something that you can control the experience on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Beautiful, man. Well, thanks for chatting with me today. Thanks for talking everything through. It's been great getting to reconnect with you. We appreciate you being on here, and thanks, man. Any parting thoughts? Yeah. Anything for our audience?
Oh, I think kind of everything we've talked about today. If you have an opportunity, I think responsibly go for it. Don't be afraid to fail. And expect that failure is inevitable no matter what, right? It may not be I think when we think failure, it doesn't mean your whole thing's going to fail. A task might fail, one effort might fail, but the overall thing has not failed, right? So I think the big thing is don't be afraid of failure. Definitely understand that you do need to put a time limit on, right? Like you can't go to New York for 20 years, right? Like you've got to be able to fail in a timely manner. But don't let it discourage you. Just take it as, everything, as long as you learn from a failure, it's not a waste, right? It's not even really a failure. It's actually a learning experience.
That's right. Beautiful. Ben Gabler, thank you, man, for joining. It's been a pleasure being your friend for 30 years we've discovered today. And I hope we have 30 more ahead of us.
Absolutely. And I'll let you know when I'm in the city. I'll come visit.
Yeah, please do. Good stuff, man. Thanks, brother.
All righty. Thanks, man. Talk soon.
Later. Hey, Thomas here again. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. The show is better when I get to hear from you. Got a question to ask our producer? Or you got a show idea or a guest I should interview? Maybe you just want to tell me that you love or can't stay on the show. Either way, I want to hear from you. You can reach me at bigbreakpod@gmail.com, and you can find my acting profile at castingtom.com or at castingtom. Big Break Pod is created and hosted by me, Thomas M. Copeland. The show is a proud member of the Pod Populi Network. Original music by me. Find the show online at bigbreakpod.com and at bigbreakpod.